Hello, everyone. Uh, Thank you so much for joining us on Sprouts Weekly Live. Today, I have Teja, Vice President of Scrut Automation, and he leads Sales and Partnership Department there. Uh, Super excited, Teja, to host you. And
Likewise, Avinash.
yeah, and today's topic is something which we have got lot many requests to talk about this topic, which is how to grow your B2B SaaS startup from 0 to 1 million in ARR, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah, super excited to host and unearth what you have to say about tactics, about challenges, about what one should do as a sales leader, marketing leader, or a founder in terms of building that 0 to 1 journey, getting to that 0 to 1 journey, right?
Absolutely,
So
Avinash. Yeah.
before we start, right, Teja, a quick intro on my side. I'm Avi. I'm co-founder at Sprouts. We are an AI-powered GTM intelligence platform, which help companies, B2B companies, to ramp up their demand generation efforts. Teja, I know you have been a founder yourself and scaled multiple startups. So before we start, can you share your journey as a founder, as a sales leader, and as person who have scaled like multiple startups on 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 kind of a journey?
Sure, Avinash. Thank you for that intro. I'm happy to be part of this conversation, which is also very close to my heart.
Yeah.
So my background essentially has been in tech sales for the most part of my career,
Mhm.
sales, business development, and other things. As you mentioned, I've also been a founder. So mostly in the very early on ad tech in India in 2008, 2011, around that. And then after that, I exit, dabbled with conversational AI, like generative AI in like 2017, 18, very early days. Um, and then other than that, mostly spent equal parts in, like, I would say, enterprises like SAP or Capgemini, and then but mostly like growth stage startups. And I realized I prevail, or I do better in like growth stage companies. So that's where the whole 0 to 1 equation came up. And it's a different set of challenges, different set of mindset you need to attune yourself to, compared to working in a more matured, predictable organization. So it's the pick, right? What kind of, like, what excites you every day to get back to work. So that's 0 to 1 for me. So that's essentially my background. Um, Also spent some time on customer success in the last few years. So most of the things we probably would talk about would also have weightage on both sides. Yeah. Uh,
Awesome. Tech sales, founder yourself, and customer success. Teja, a follow-up question, right? Like, as per you, right? I know it's very difficult to pick, but
yeah.
which role do you feel is more challenging? Like, is it customer success or it is like tech sales in 0 to 1? What do you think? What are your thoughts in your personal
That's,
experience?
yeah, that's a tricky one, Avinash. But like, I would still say, like, I think tech sales would be
Okay.
more complex, because I
Mhm.
think, just thinking from the perspective of what comes first, right? Like, ultimately, you need customers and sales in the door before
Mhm.
customer success can actually, add value, show them time to value, or like just continue to have them engaged and grow from there, right? So I would definitely say tech sales would be more complex, yeah,
Got it.
or difficult, challenging part, yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, hopping onto the very little discussion, very title of this discussion, right? Like, which is a secret behind 0 to 1 million ARR. I would like to break down Teja into two parts, right? Like my first question is, what are the nuances of kickstarting, right? Is there something which is do you have a checklist for it? Like, hey, you know what? These are top 5 things we have to do. These are the steps we have to follow. You should have MVP first, product market fit, and then you have to do, let's say, sales. That's the first part, right? What are the nuances? The second part
Yeah.
of the question is getting to that first million ARR. What's the playbook like, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can I get into that repeatable motion so that I can get to at least, let's say, 1 million in ARR?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Avinash, for laying that out. So I would say the first to start with, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, unfortunately, there is no magic bullet to get to
Okay.
the 1 million ARR. I know
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to disappoint the people who joined us today. So I'll just try to lay it out in a sense that we can have it, approach it in a different way, right? In a particular way. So I think I would always, just keeping myself first in the shoes of a founder, because I think this is
Mm-hmm.
more relevant to them. And I've been a
Right.
founder myself too. So
Yes.
you've been too, like, I think, so
Yes.
we can talk about that. So I would always start with the most important part of the entire process is understanding your ICP, right? The
Yeah.
ideal customer profile.
Yeah.
I say that because to get to a million or a half a million or a 10 million, like whatever that breakup number is, right, or milestone number is, it ultimately comes down to I really love Christopher Yan's like point nine VCs, like Christopher's model. He did it like way long back, I think 2014 or something like that, in the early days of SaaS.
Okay.
So what he essentially tries to say is like you can get to that million in 3 or 4 ways, right?
Okay.
By selling to enterprise, where
Mm-hmm.
probably you would need like 10, 100K customers,
Yes.
right? Or you can sell to mid market like 50, 20K customers, or
Yeah.
like 10, 100, 10K customers, right? So you can, it's a choice basically,
Yes.
right? And also it comes down to the product, because
Mm-hmm.
where your product essentially will fit into, at least in the early days, right? Now everyone wants to sell to enterprise. It's not, that's not a secret, right? But
Yeah.
like at least like where your product is a better fit than the other way around, right? And even for that, I think that's why ICP is extremely important, because how
Mm-hmm.
well do you understand your ideal customer profile, their pain points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is your product exactly answering them or addressing them, or like is there any other way around that, right? So
Got it.
I would actually start from there and then
Mm-hmm.
work backwards in trying to understand the ICP, their segment, and what is the typical ACVs. Like, when you can find benchmarks like pretty. I generally took the baseline where enterprise is typically about 100K and mid market is about like 40 to 50K, and then
Got
SMB is about 10K, right? So you can find that mix and
it. Mm-hmm.
then essentially work backwards in terms of like, this will obviously come into the playbooks question you asked about, but
Yeah.
start from the ICP, understand how are they actually buying. That's the second
Got it.
important part, right?
Right.
Which channel? I usually use this simple framework like who, what, where, and
Yeah.
like so on and so forth, right? So who's the ICP? What channel do they use to actually buy? Uh, Irrespective of whether they're enterprise or mid market or something, right? Someone
Mm-hmm.
might like to connect with like sellers generally through more preferred, like their own network or something like that, or customer referrals, right? Or someone is open to taking social media outreach, like on LinkedIn
Yep.
or something like that, finding new sellers or new vendors or whatever that is, right? So it depends.
Exactly.
Or someone would just like to not talk to sellers at all and just like go
Exactly.
to G2 Crowd, do their own research and come back, right? So it depends on what are in your ICP, in your segment that you've selected, what is the way they like to consume or connect with vendors. Start
Okay.
from there and then
Mm-hmm.
work backwards so that you'll have the answer about like how should you approach this, right? There are like a high level benchmarks available in the market. Like you can just like do secondary research or talk to I'm sure like if you just work like dig a little deeper, you'll find friends in the exact ICP somewhere, right? So you can
Absolutely.
start with them, try to get the knowledge, and then benchmark it, and then test it, and then go from there. So this typically, I think, I've seen it work many times, and I think
Right.
it will always stand the test of the time, or stand true to it, even if the technologies or like the SaaS or the demand curves, all of these change. I think the basics always remain the same, and I think that's where you got to start, at least for the first part, where you said like, how do you start? Like, where do you start,
Yes.
right? So, and
Got it.
then the second part of it, playbooks. It's I think it's a very broad topic, but I'll try
Exactly.
to bring it down to like, let's look at the million again. As I mentioned, in terms of playbooks, even if it's like 0 to 1 or 1 to 5, 5 to 10, there's always those playbooks for each stage, right? And generally, once you set the playbook, it typically holds like true for those particular things, but the same playbook can be replicated or scaled into other revenue targets or segments also. Speaking specifically to 0 to 1, I
Mm-hmm.
would I would actually, when I'm building a playbook as a founder, I would
Mm-hmm.
typically look at first the ICP, the segment, and then understand actually, kind of reverse engineering, right? Trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand if my goal is a million, and let's say I need to get 10 customers. Let's, for the sake of it, let's think about enterprise, right? Because enterprise has different. The other important thing is sales closure timelines, right? Like from your first interaction, which is like a qualified lead, to your closed one, how much time does it take, right? And you got to bake that in to actually understand, can you get to a million in a year or not, right?
Right.
So example being like an enterprise today in enterprise SaaS, typically the timelines are about 9 months, at least nine
Exactly.
months to a year, right? You
Yeah.
start the conversation with them in Jan, and then December is when they'll actually buy from you, right? If
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
more. So then getting to 10 customers, that means and it's also, Avinash, it's simple. It's like that machinery thing, right? What, like input and output, right? Like input
Right.
raw material is like, let's say it's qualified leads.
Mm-hmm.
Then the whole process you're running is the manufacturing process, and then the output is essentially what a closed one or like a customer contract is, right?
Gotcha.
So you got to understand, based on that reverse engineering, if I have to get to a million in a year, I have to
Mm-hmm.
have at least 10 qualified leads, or whatever that conversion rate is.
Mm-hmm.
That again is a subject in itself, right? Like, because
Yeah.
each segment, each industry has a different conversion rates and closure rates or timelines, how much they take.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of these benchmarks available already.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of work has been done in that space. You can always start with a certain hypothesis around, like, okay, I'm going after enterprise. I would need 10 customers closed. This is 10% or whatever conversion rate. I look at different channels, right? Where is in that what I talked earlier? What, who, where? Where is the channels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about very basic three main channels, right? So I mean, further breaking it down from like outbound, inbound, or like that sort of a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to understand in each of those channels what, in the segment I'm going after,
Mm-hmm.
for my SaaS, what is the general conversion rate, right?
Got
And
it.
then you basically build the model or a playbook, trying to understand in each channel, to actually get to the end outcome, which is like 10 closed enterprise customers, how
Mm-hmm.
many qualified leads, or in each stage of your CRM, like however you design it, how many
Mm-hmm.
leads should I have, and are they moving in the right direction across that 1 year timeline, right? If not, you have to test the hypothesis quickly, and then optimize for it as soon as possible, right? um, the only thing in this playbook, while founders are building this playbook, what I would suggest is that do not lay too much of an emphasis on inbound, or like your whole marketing engine in the initial 6 months
Exactly.
or 9 months, because
Yeah.
the fastest I've seen, some people like, I think Rocket Lane is a very good example. We all have
Yeah.
seen that.
Yeah.
Like they build a very strong community. Even Intercom was like that back in the day,
Mhm.
right? HubSpot is another example. They all
Yes.
build like very active communities before they even launch the product, right? For
Uh,
them, that optimization cycle might be a little faster, but in most cases, this whole optimizing the inbound marketing engine takes at least 6 to 9 months, right? So if you have a goal of a year to get to a million, and you spend 6 9 months just like optimizing the marketing, you've seen that, Avinash, like on the
yeah.
marketing side, it takes time, right? It is
Take time.
good, but it takes time, right?
Yeah.
So definitely spending those first 6 9 months while setting up the content and the marketing and all of that, spending that time on building your outbound engine
Hmm.
would actually help you in, like, one, making sure the whole funnel is staying active, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're actually working according to your conversion rates and stuff. So
Got
then, like, start with like I would say an 80-20 mix, or a 90-10 mix in between, like outbound and inbound, and then slowly work your way up to probably like 70-30, or even 65-35 by the end of the first year, which will obviously get you closer to that million, and then you can start to optimize other channels. So yeah, I mean, we spoke about a lot, but generally bringing it down to, first, take whatever that goal is, and you have to start working it backwards in the
Backwards.
timeline which is more realistic to you. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. A follow up to that, Teja, right? Like
Yeah.
one of my close friend is starting up soon, and his own startup. He asked me to ask this question to you specifically, and the question is, when should a founder start selling, right? So can somebody start selling when they are still in MVP stage, or let's say, okay, my product is out and I want to, now I am ready to give this product to customer. Like what has been your experience, your 2 cents on this?
So it also depends on. Thank you, Anush. That's an interesting question. I feel it actually breaks down into two parts.
Hmm.
It actually comes down to the space you're operating. On a
Okay.
general sense, if you're just like reading online or listening to different founders and stuff,
Hmm.
successful founders also, most of the time what they say is start selling early, right? And as
Yeah.
early as possible, like even when you just have like bunch of wireframes or like whatever that is, because anyways you would start with your closest network, your ex colleagues or like whoever that is, right? Who could be potential buyers. But
Yeah.
I would say it depends on what is the expected bar in your space right now.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you're operating in a crowded space, when I say
Hmm.
crowded, I don't want to sound it like a very difficult word or something like that, but generally, which is more uh, commercialized, which is more commoditized, or there are like a lot of players in the market. Each one probably have their own moat or
Hmm.
USPs and stuff. But like typically, if it's a crowded space, you got to adhere to at least the base level expectation of how an MVP should look like,
Got
even
it.
before you go first time to show it someone. Because in most, in most of the times, like what I've seen is, as a founder, you typically have one chance when you actually go and get some time from a buyer,
Hmm.
and then when they look at it and they know the space well. If they don't see anything which is worthwhile their time in terms of product or actual it's solving a very specific problem, and they're able to see that being solved in the demo or somewhere like that, you generally don't get a second shot for a very long time, right? So I would say, again, on the other hand, if it's like a space which is very niche, right, and like there are not many products in that, and it's like a very futuristic problem solving, very high tech technical solving, that sort of a thing, then even like probably having like few workflows or a couple of demo videos or anything like that might still work. So it actually depends on the space, but ideally, I would recommend having a base level MVP before you start selling in today's SaaS world. Yeah.
Understood. Understood. Fair point. Teja, the next part of the question is, right, like scaling 0 to 1,
Yeah.
it requires a solid team to get
Yeah.
to that level, right? And I like I have been following this, and like in my previous org also, like you are average of your team, right? Like what are those things, as an entrepreneur or a marketeer or a sales leader, we should think of when we are building that 0 to 1 team? What are those top 3 to 4 qualities one should look for? Like if I have to break it down, right, Teja, how to scout the right talent, how to identify them, how to train them and make them ready to be, and motivate them enough to be part of that journey. How can we do that?
Uh, uh, that's a that's again a very how would I put it, like critical thing to answer. Like, so let me give it a shot this way. So any hiring, whether
Hmm.
it's 0 to 1 or above, but specifically for 0 to 1, you can think it from the lens of whether you're trying to solve a capacity problem, or you're trying to solve like a subject matter expert or like a knowledge problem, right? Founders could be like very technical, or founders might come from different backgrounds, and you might not have a go to market, or you might not have an engineering founder, or like you might not have so on and so forth, right? So typically the first set of hiring which I've typically seen is always to solve like a subject matter expertise or like that sort of a problem, and to make the team more well rounded. So you typically start from there, and then once you slowly start growing the team, as in line with like the revenue or your funding scenarios and like all of that, is then when you actually start to look at capacity solving problems, right?
Right.
Instead of having one BDR, you have two BDRs, or like so on and so forth, right? So always we would start from there and then look for how many people and what you would need. I would highly recommend the pod system,
Yeah.
where typically if you're selling to enterprise, let's say for example, having like a small pod to first implement the pipe or pipeline, or like your first 100K or 200K revenue, and then scale it from there would be a good idea. So typically having a mix of a couple of BDRs. BDRs always work in pairs, so
Yeah.
something like that. And then like if it's a complex sales cycle, having a solution engineer very early in the cycle, um, um, and then like and then like AE, and then account executive to close, and basically a CSM to manage the NRR and growth, right? So always good to just have one pod first before and see how it works, and then scale it from there, right? Whether it's entering new geography or like entering a new arena, whatever that setup is, pod system has been spoken about. People have spoken about pod system a lot, and I think it works most of the time, especially for startups, right? So I would highly recommend to look into that, right? Second, what qualities should you generally look
Yeah.
for when
Exactly.
hiring, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, in most cases, what happens, Avinash, is like, not that it's one way good or bad, but generally, typically, what we see happening is people always go for someone who's spent a lot of time in enterprise and all of that. Probably you still sell for enterprise. That's a different equation, and you need people on subject matter expertise, as I said. But always check for um, are they are they ready or prepared for how the situation would be once they get into a growth stage startup, especially 0 to 1 million journey, right? You do not have much of the playbook set up. You don't have processes set up. There's constant change day in day out. Every day you come, there's like probably something else, a new thing which comes up, right? Because you have to keep up the pace and keep changing according to how things are, right? Especially in a fast pace, like high growth startups and stuff. So, and most of the times I feel like people are not prepared for it. They
Hmm.
know what to expect because they speak to
Yeah.
other friends who've worked there and stuff, but
Hmm.
they're hit with challenges when they actually get into the process. So I would say try to find a balance between someone who's got that subject matter expertise,
Mm-hmm.
and also who's kind of worked in high growth startups or something like that, been a founder themselves or something like that. So at least you don't have to worry about, as a founder, you wouldn't have another headache of managing someone else's expectations, right? So I would always start from there, and then always hire for growth and to promote internally, right? Especially in startups. I would say inevitably you have to take bets on people, raw talent, and like people who are at least who show intent and accountability. I think that's the most important thing. You can't always check for that in interviews, but as much as you can, always go for that rather than like Rolodex in sales or like whatever that is, right? I would always stick to this side, and it works in most of the time, right? And hiring wise, I think uh, obviously startups, most of them at least cannot afford like going to headhunters and like all of that. But I would say I think James Eiley, like Cognizant founder, he just wrote like a very big article on LinkedIn, I think, other day, talking
Hmm.
about how they spent 500,000 on headhunters and it actually worked well for him.
Okay.
So to hire the key executives and stuff. So you have to think about what are you trying to solve. You're trying to solve the time problem, or you're trying to solve the actual, like if you don't have the hurry of like getting someone in the role right now and you start early, LinkedIn, I felt for me worked always well. Your personal network first, or
Mhm.
and more often we see these days that you always tap into your ex colleagues and like stuff whom you
Yeah.
work with, right? Companies are made out of that, right? Like the mafias and like all of that, Freshworks or like whatever, right? We see it,
Yeah.
PayPal, we see it all the time. So so your previous colleagues, like ex network, because you already worked with them, and then moving on to actual like LinkedIn, trying to scout people through LinkedIn would always work well. If you are funded and you are on a time crunch, then there are some specialized like hiring recruiting agencies for startups today.
Mhm.
um, Working with them would help you save time, even if you have to pay them a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah.
because you have
Yeah.
to assume the ramp, right? Which more
Yes.
you see that always. It's a very common common sense sort of a thing, but like people always miss that, right?
Exactly.
It's not it's not, which generally the first answer is, oh, I don't need someone till like June, right? But then you have to realize that person will only start delivering in like October or November, like even if you get
Exactly.
them in June, right? So
Exactly.
you have to optimize for that. Otherwise, the entire playbook you built based
Hmm.
on resources and replication or like whatever will all start falling through, right? So
Exactly.
that's these important attributes or levers, and people obviously is one of them. Apart
Yeah.
from resources and financial resources and other things, you have to plan in advance.
Got it. Got it. Very interesting. Very interesting, Teja. Many insights. I'm going to, use it myself. Uh, Moving on, right? Teja, the next part is, uh, like, you have done this 0 to 1 journey multiple times. Uh, what are the, like, if I have to keep it very, very simple, right? What are the top 3 challenges which you have faced? That's the first part, right? And what are your recommendations to founders, like what are the top 3 things not to do, right? Like what are the 3 challenges which you have faced, which you feel that everybody can relate to, and I'm pretty sure there must be some solution to it. And what are top 3 things which one should avoid doing when building that, when having that 0 to 1 kind of a journey? Yeah.
It's yeah, I'll see how to answer that. Okay, so I would say challenges wise, Avinash, we can just like start from challenges. I
Yeah.
feel the biggest challenges would be threefold. One
Mhm.
is obviously the resources, because you're working with very limited set of resources and trying to do like 10x work or 100x work based on that,
Resource
right?
crunch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first is resources and like funding crunches or like whatever that is, especially in the
Yeah.
environment we are seeing today. the
Yeah.
second the second part is having the right set of people to work on those challenges, right? As we talked about hiring, definitely always the biggest problem, right? You
Yes.
see people who have made it there and like been very successful in SaaS and stuff. The very first thing is people, right? They have very strong team execution and like all of that, right? And the third is actually moving fast. A lot of people actually don't, I mean, they know that, but eventually it always falls off the cracks or something. You got to move extremely fast, right? uh, in execution, in like hiring, in like if you're a VC backed company, like raising, always the cycle has to be like clear and very fast. That's when I
Exactly.
think you would hit those milestones and keep moving, right? So those are, I feel like, and that's not easy thing to do. That's why it's a challenge, right? Because you know you have to test. You have to start with an hypothesis, obviously,
Yes.
whether that's like ICP or like segment or whatever that is, your playbook. Test it and then have certain benchmarks in mind, as we talked about. Like in my industry, to give you an example, in an industry, let's say 10% is the conversion rate from like qualified lead to demo, right? You
Mhm.
start with that, but suddenly
Mhm.
you see like it's actually like 1% or 2%. So you have to optimize quickly for it and change things, right? So
Right.
test, optimize, iterate, and then repeat that cycle, right? And do that as many times as possible and fast, right? Whether it's channel, whether it's hiring, whether it's like your segment, your buyer's needs, whatever that is, like all those cycles have to be like start with hypothesis, test, and then like repeat and iterate, right? So, and do it faster. So I would say those things. One of the other bigger challenge we see is like, how do you balance product, investing in product growth, features, and like all of that, and that like from where what you have today to where what market wants, and like how do you balance that cycle, right? Because
Mhm.
salespeople will always come back to you as a founder
Mhm.
and say that, hey, like we're hearing this, we would need this and that, and then product doesn't have that, so we're losing it. So there are many ways to kind of balance that cycle. One I would say is, even and I wouldn't say that only for product gaps today. Even in SaaS, the base level expectation has become is that you do more of white glove support, more of hand holding from the CS side or the implementation side, and not just, even though there is the best product out there, the
Yeah.
expectation has become so baseline that they customers are expecting a lot of hand holding and like white glove support in terms of implementations also, right? And you can probably use that to balance the gap between where the product gaps are for now and where you could be in like 3 to 6 months, because engineering definitely would need time to build those, right? So I feel that that is the biggest challenge we've seen. So like in at least in this period, what I'm observing. Yeah.
Got it. Got it.
But mantra would only be hypothesis, test, iterate, and optimize, and repeat that cycle.
Optimize, and also I think speed of doing things is
Correct.
something is very important. And you also talked about ruthless prioritization, right? Like what to prioritize, because otherwise you will get so many requests. You have to make sure your prioritization is in place.
And one important thing I think I should definitely mention, Avinash, and I've used this kind of matrix or like whatever in like a lot of things personally also.
Mm-hmm.
uh, don't try to solve too many problems at one time. It's usually you always hear founders hear this all the time from VCs, like all the hey, you got like multitask, like do these things and solve multiple friends and stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
would say at least from 0 to 1 journey, always try to pick your battles and like prioritize ruthlessly on like which problem you need to solve first to take you to the next step, right? Because if getting to a series A or like a seed round, whatever is your topmost priority, because
Mm-hmm.
I otherwise you will run out of your runway or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
Always prioritize what will get you there, not about like 5 years down the line or 3 years down the line whether your vision will stay alive or not. Don't think that far, right? Especially in today's environment, and I
Understood.
would definitely recommend that. Yeah.
Understood. Understood. Interesting. Interesting. The next follow up to that, Teja, right? Is We talked about 0 to 1, we talked about sales, we talked about hiring, how to hire an A player and ramping up the teams. You have also led and scaled partnership teams, right? And that is completely a different ecosystem altogether, right? The way you execute stuff, the way you identify partners, the way you engage them, the way you get value out of it. It's all of a it's a different playbook altogether, right? The execution motion is different. How important it is to get partnership motion in place in 0 to 1, because Teja, personally I have been hearing, right, like 0 to 1, few people say that hey, you should get the partnership motion set up early. Some few people say that this is not the right time, maybe sometime down the lane you should, once you have you know uh, reached a certain point, let's say 5, 10 million or 20 million, that is the right time. So in your experience, what do you recommend? Like, is it a good strategy to enter partnership play early, or take some time, build a brand, and then execute the partnership motion?
Yeah, thanks, Anish. That's a very important question, and I think something very close to my heart.
Sure.
I feel partnerships in general, right?
Mhm.
And if you look at it, the way channel works has been evolving over the last 10 years, right? And how much, at what stage and what segment do you actually need channel to help you? Channel, as in like the partner sales, right? Partner
Mhm.
led motion or whatever that is. Earlier days, if you go 10 years back, usually people were very clear that, oh, it's for enterprise customers or enterprise. If you're selling in enterprise, then channel might help open few doors or like whatever based on relationships, right? Then
Mhm.
it trickled down to mid market because now mid market has started. Buying patterns are very much like enterprise. Like they are mid market, but when they actually looking to buy something, they act like enterprise in most of the cases these days, right? In cycles or like whatever that is, right? And so then it came down to, oh, okay, probably we need channel in like mid market also now, right? And then it has trickled down to SMB too, because SMB has a lot of relationships and stuff. Like in referral partnerships, it works like really well, right?
Mhm.
So if you put them into majorly three buckets: referral, reseller, and technology, I think starting early on really helps. And I've seen in many cases where for some very well, I don't want to take names, but like very well, like super successful startups have 60 to 70% of their sales come through channel, right? Direct versus indirect and whatever. So I say I would definitely recommend to founders like start looking at partnerships as a channel very early on, and you don't have to put tons and tons of time or whatever. Always start with the low hanging fruits, which is typically referral partnerships, right? And I've seen in most cases like where I was involved with, like in different startups, like it even goes to like 30-35% or 40% of the funnel came from like partnerships, right? Like referral partnerships, not even like reselling or like technology. So tap into different kinds of channels and stuff very early on, and then invest in it, because given how most of the segments in SaaS today are turning out to be, again, crowded, commoditized, and like it's getting there. What differentiates truly and like sometimes a buyer's perspective is like, can they do they have that trust and perception on you or not, right? And it's very hard to build unless you have a big marketing machine or something like that. But what
Mhm.
can get you in the door is a trusted partner who already they have relationship with, like an MS, like MSP in our, like in security world, or like generally SIs and stuff, who already have existing relationship. They have the ear of the buyer, and generally they're more open to suggestions from them than like a external person trying to, already they have this issue. Oh, this is a sales guy, right? Like he's gonna obviously try sell me, sort of a thing. So always try to build that channel and invest in channel from early days. And then technology partnerships also work really well. Like if you are in a same space, same segment, like for example, two security vendors, right, or two go-to-market vendors.
Mhm.
If you don't directly compete with each other, always try to build a joint GTM in wherever possible. Even if you have the integration or not with each other, that always help. It'll help you to get to more buyers in a lesser period of time. So I would say definitely invest in channel. Start early as much as possible, and give it some time. Don't expect like things to happen in like 3 months or 1 quarter or two. Wait for it. Like even the large marketplaces, right? A lot of people have heard about it. Oh shit, like I should get onto AWS and it'll solve all my problems, right?
Mhm.
Why would AWS like promote you, right? Like, so it takes time, but invest at least, keep a lead time of 9 months to a year, or somewhere between 6 months to a year, based on your segments and stuff. It'll definitely pay back. I'll vouch on it.
Got it. Got it. So the key takeaway is start early investing on partnership channel, and key to that is you have to identify what kind of channel partnership you have to focus on, which can
Correct.
results. Right. We are
Yes.
almost about time, Teja. But one last question,
Sure.
and then maybe we will wrap up.
Sure.
It's like in almost like 2 years, sorry, 2 decades of experience, right? What are the top three advices would you like to give to startup founders? Like very raw advice, which you would like to give to startup founders who are especially dealing in a B2B SaaS space. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I would say be realistic, be
Mm-hmm.
optimistic,
Okay.
and be persistent and stubborn, right? Because whether you're a founder in a space which is highly technical, which is very new, blue
Mm-hmm.
ocean, like whatever that is, right? You got to hold on. Which you obviously started with a vision, right? So you got to hold on to your vision, believe in it, and go all the way. And that needs, like a sales guy, right? Like you need to have a lot of you need to work with a lot of persistence and like stuff, and be stubborn about your thoughts and like stuff. Be
Mm-hmm.
realistic on what you're testing and what the data is showing up, or like whatever that is. But be optimistic, be bullish, be realistic, and then obviously also be very persistent on your idea and see it through. Hard, like especially for founders, hardships can come in all different directions, and like all the way through, right? But people generally we see like who are extremely successful in most cases are the folks who have seen it through, whether it's 8 years, 10 years, whatever that is, right? So yeah. So anyways, I would leave them with that thought.
Awesome, awesome. I'm going to take those things very seriously now. So cool. So we are about time, Teja. Thank you so much for taking out time and talking to us. Really means a lot, and I'm pretty sure audience out there live have thoroughly enjoyed this session and had like many takeaways. Again, right, we would like to host you soon again, Teja. But thank you so much for taking our time and sharing your experiences with us. Really means a lot.
Pleasure,
Thank you.
Avinash. Likewise, thanks for having me on board.
All
Bye.
right.